Jamie Yolanda, thank you again.
Welcome back. Just got to do one thing first. I'm very sorry. There's just a slight malfunction here for me. I do apologize. Can everyone hear us? Can everybody see us? If people are comfortable, could you please put your videos on? If we can't have your video, we can't have your video, but it's really hard for us to just speak to boxes. If you're in any way willing or able, even if you're in your car, even if you're cooking, we don't care. Video helps us. Okay, amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, just to thank Jamie and Ilana for being so flexible and so willing to adjust to deal with our South African idiosyncrasies. We are thrilled to have you guys back and looking forward to tonight and as well as next week. Go for it.
I'm very happy to be with you guys too. Sorry about the power outages, especially when it's cold. It's not nice. I'm sorry. Anyway, we wanted just to start off by seeing if there was any feedback from last week, just in terms of if you had any, did people have insights from any of the exercises concerning values? We're not naive. We don't think everyone took a week off university and spent the last 7 days just writing value lists or anything like that. We understand. But is there any feedback at all? Does anyone have anything they want to share from the exercises? Did people find them helpful? Anything like that? Give us thumbs ups or write something if you want to, or speak.
Thumbs up is fine. Good. Okay. Right. This is a bit like watching an exercise video. It's pretty good if you watch it, but it works better if you actually do the work.
That's right.
Generally.
Generally. Okay, good. So, okay, good. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, so we're moving on. We're moving on a little bit now. We've been spoke last week a little bit about the intellectual, the values, the cerebral, the philosophical, all of that good stuff, about the way that, about finding compatibility in that, connecting to your partner, your potential partner, looking for this in the person, in the people that you are dating, for real compatibility, connection on the basis of values. And today we want to move it into E, and into the physical, into the emotional and into the physical, to talk a little bit about our perspective on how potentially to build, to select, to find a good partner, the right partner, and to build in those two areas.
Yeah, totally. So we're going to run through a bunch of basics, really, in terms of E-compatibility. And we're going to start at the very beginning. The very first question that you may have heard me say before in the IEP seminar, but we're going to go into it much deeper today. The very first question is a question of, am I okay? It's a very simple question. Is that a hand? It's a very simple question, but it's a very crucial question. And the question is, am I okay? And we'll define that. And whatever question we ask of ourselves, we really need to ask of the partner as well. Are you okay? Am I okay?
Just 1 second, my Zoom, I just lost the...
I think they were trying to tell us that it was, they lost us.
No. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear us okay?
I'm not sure you lost us. So this question of am I okay? Okay in this context means I'm at a point in my life where I'm really ready to live with another person, to recognize that I need to open.
Jonathan Horowitz, would you mind muting, please?
Sorry, happens sometimes. Thank you. Am I in a place in my own, growth, sort of awareness, love that I'm ready to give? And there are reasons why I may not be at that place, and I'm going to discuss that now. The first reason I may not be is simply because I haven't matured to baby, right? Babies are the most selfish creatures you will ever encounter. it's amazing that we like it. It put mothers through tremendous pain.
Rabbi Zitskin, would you mind muting everybody, please, and then unmuting us, or whoever is editing, whoever's the Kayla, you need to mute. Great, we're now, you guys can hear me? Can I see a thumbs up? Okay, brilliant. Hopefully this will be good now.
Okay. So we're saying babies are very, very, very selfish. I mean, really, if any adult behaved like a baby did, they'd be like out of the house, right?
Trust me.
Like, you know, they cause a lot of pain. They demand by screaming. They don't say thank you. They don't even smile for the first 6 weeks. I mean, really, as creatures, it's a good thing they're cute. They are remarkably selfish. And we come into this world remarkably selfish. And part of the growing up experience is actually to become aware of others. You know, and it's very interesting because one of the most selfish stages that we go through is our teenage stage. And the reason that we're so selfish in that teenage stage is because we are so completely focused now. As a child, we were oblivious to how, you know, dependent we were. As a teenager, we start to become very conscious of the fact that we have to get our own identity, and we become completely obsessed with our own identity. I always find it remarkable, you know, when I see teenagers, they can be the nicest kids in the whole world, but they're completely oblivious to anybody but themselves at the same time. It's not a question of whether they will be nice adults. It's just part of this, it's such an enormous absorption with where they are that they just sometimes don't even notice the people around them. It's really amazing.
I mean, if I could just interject for a second, I think that that's normal.
Yeah.
In other words, in developmental terms, you know, we're learning how to cope with the world. We're learning how to interact with the world. We're learning, in very primal terms, we're learning about danger. We're learning about safety. And we have to be careful. And there comes a point in time when you become a little bit more adult, when you become more confident, I guess, of your ability to survive, your ability to be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes what should happen is that we should grow nicely into adulthood, whereby we become slightly aware of others. And sometimes there are things that happen in our process that keep us completely self-absorbed. You know, I have this horrible phrase that you'll know what I mean when I say, you know, the lower the self-esteem, the higher the self-obsession. Or have you noticed that in your own lives or in the lives of people around you, right? Sometimes we get so caught up in dealing with something that we haven't actually matured. So first of all, we have to check whether we are mature enough, not just on a values level, which also requires maturity, but on a personal level, that I'm now at that stage where I can afford emotionally to look out for others because I feel quite safe. The parable is somebody who's drowning. Somebody who's drowning may happen to notice somebody else who's drowning. Often they won't because they can't, because they're so busy trying not to drown. Even if they notice them, they're certainly not able to help them. You need to be strong in the water to see somebody else and to be able to help them in their drowning. So emotionally, the first question is, am I sort of ready? Have I hit that stage where I feel settled enough about myself that I'm ready to start thinking of partnership as a question of giving? Because otherwise what happens, and this we have to really look out for when we're dating, if we haven't done the work to mature and to be aware of others, then our desire for relationship doesn't come from a place of wanting to give. It comes from a place of neediness. And I say that very slowly, not because you're thick, but because we are going to talk about needs. There's a difference between needs, which are healthy and normal and will be with us throughout our lives, and neediness, which is often a temporary state that is not a great state in which to find a partner. Right?
Look, you know, so the idea over here of neediness, I say it slightly differently. I always say as follows: don't get into a relationship to solve your problem of loneliness. Okay, you got to only get into a relationship out of a readiness and a desire to give. Okay. Now, when you're needy, and by the way, there are levels of this need. We're all needy on some level. And I say to Alana on a daily basis, You're saving my life. You know, you're keeping me moving forward. Of course, we have needs, and our partner, we're needy, and we have weaknesses, and we're not perfect. And our partners, hopefully in life, really help us with that. Really help us with that. That was just a male being vulnerable, by the way, in case you didn't realize what that was. Yeah. Right? But it's true and it's real. You know, we're needy as well as needs. Right. So and those things elevate and develop over time, of course. But you know, there's this whole concept in the world of like men aren't ready to commit and all of this crazy stuff that's out there. Because when I'm in a very needy state, Ilana gave that great analogy before, like a drowning person. I just see everyone else around me in terms of what they're going to give to me, and it's a normal stage of development. It's nothing wrong, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more during the session. But because we live in a world where relationships are expected, there's something weird with you. You know, at least anecdotally. I don't mean individuals. You know, of course, each individual lives their life their way. But anecdotally, if a person is, 16 or 17 and they've never had a boyfriend or they've never had a girlfriend, there's like something, weird about that in the secular world or in the Western world, in the general atmosphere. And I think that where that comes from, where that feeds into, it just means that people are getting into relationships and they're not really ready to be in a place of giving. And as we always say, no one taps you on the shoulder at 21 or 22 or 23 or 24 and suddenly says to you, oh, now you have to switch your focus. Now you have to switch your focus in relationships. And that's why you'll meet people who are 25 or 35 or 45 or even 55 or 65 who are still just using people around them, right, to plug up their own, the holes in their own character development rather than being in a place of giving.
Yeah, in fact, I would go as far as to say that when we have a lot, and by the way, don't feel bad if you've been through this because we're going to solve it in a minute, but if people have had a lot of relationships when they were very young, some people think that really prepares you for life, but in many ways it doesn't. Because what's happened is, and you've gotten into the habit of always, having somebody to rescue you from your lack of self-worth, because at least, by wanting to date you, they prove that you are, worthy, or you've always been in a couple rather than, by yourself. And very often, I find anyway, and I'm sure you've seen this also with your friends or yourselves, there's something incredibly healthy actually about saying, I've dated for all my teenage years, and now I'm actually going to take a break from it before I head into a new relationship in order to just establish who I am by myself. A teenager once said to me, they said, what's wrong with having like a boyfriend in your teens? This is coming from a religious perspective. I'm not saying it's actually wrong. It was just a cultural thing, in their world that wasn't okay. And they said, what's wrong with that? And I had to think quite deeply to answer the question, apart from because that's what we do, And I said to them, and I think there's truth in this. I said the goal of your teenage years is to actually figure out who you are and to really like that and to really like yourself. And what you do when you bring in a relationship too soon is you delegate that sense of I like myself to somebody else. And then the minute they go, you need to find somebody else because you've delegated it, right? We have to reclaim the sense of self that we get from actually not being in a relationship. So that when we hit a relationship, it's not there to solve our feeling of, our insecurity about being worthy of love, but it's actually two people who feel quite lovable independently, who are now able to meet each other's needs. It's a completely different dynamic. And if you've been in relationships all through your younger years, if it works for you, if you're single now, don't want to cause any breakups. If you are single now, that's not such a terrible thing. Sometimes it's a great time to sort of take back what you delegated and to say, hold on, I need to feel good about myself.
Right.
Independently.
And just to throw it back, by the way, to last week, it's also very true, of course. This is true of the emotional part of ourselves, getting to know ourselves. What is my character? What is my natural way of being, etc., etc. But it's also deeply true in terms of values, and it just takes some time to really think about stuff. There's a guy on the internet, a guy called Dave Rubin. I'm pretty sure that's his name. And he started like a YouTube channel, and he was like a serious liberal, super left-wing liberal guy. And he interviewed a whole bunch of more right-wing political thinkers and entered into a very honest dialogue with them. And after a couple of years of doing it, he switched his TV show around, and he considers himself to be centre-right now, more in terms of more conservative values, right? That's a very honest thing to do, but you know, forget the publicity of the thing, which I think made it quite hard from an ego standpoint. But as human beings, you know, we have to have time to consider things more maturely, or, you know, and to give ourselves the time that we need to think about philosophy, that's the I, and to think about our emotional development, which is the E. So the first point over here is you've got to be ready to give, you've got to mature out of this more self-oriented teenage or young adult stage, which isn't measured in years, it's more measured in work.
Right. So that would be someone like a non-strong swimmer who's trying to save somebody else. You're not ready to help because you just haven't learned how to swim. And then there's a person who's drowning. And what that might mean over here in terms of extending the analogy to the reality is that it's not that I'm not ready to give in terms of my maturity or my awareness of others. It's that I'm dealing with things that are so overwhelming in my own life right now that I'm not really in a position to be emotionally able to give. Okay. I'll give you some examples of these, and you'll be able to extrapolate from your own experiences whether, you know, this works, this suits you right now. But if you are dealing with, you know, the 3 A's come to mind: abuse, aggression, addiction, right? Any of those things that are so overwhelming as emotional experiences that you know that you have to get yourself okay before you can start to give to others. Don't be afraid to take the time to do that, and don't run to a relationship to solve that. And I'll tell you why not. You know, when people are really drowning and they run to a relationship, let's have a look at what happens. I'm in the sea and I'm drowning, and somebody comes along and they says, "Oh, hi, I've got a rope." What am I going to say? I'm going to say, "Yes, I do." Okay, because I'm so overwhelmed with my drowning that all I can consider right now is someone who's going to help me survive this. But then what happens when you get pulled to shore and you're no longer drowning, and then you look at the person who's thrown you the rope and you're like, "Oh no, I didn't really mean it. I actually just really wanted the rope," right? And we see this very often. Sometimes I make a decision because I'm in a bad place that is so much about my immediate sense of relief from the pain that I'm in, that if I'm out of that pain, I no longer hold by my decision. The decision doesn't really count, because when I'm in pain, not only can I not give to you, but I can't necessarily make a long-term decision for myself. And it's interesting because I'll be very transparent over here. I used to teach this, and in the back of my mind, I had like something that was bothering me about what I was saying, which is that, you know, there's actually one case where this isn't true. You see people who married when they were in pain, and their marriages are very happy, right? And I was thinking of Holocaust survivors, right? They kind of all married each other, and they sort of stayed married, you know, happy for many, many years. And I was trying to resolve what I was saying with this experience. And, you know, it occurred to me that we could say that because that trauma is a lifelong trauma, it was okay for them to marry into it because it never really went away. It was never really outgrown. But if we're dealing with, and that's really the difference between neediness and a need. If you're talking about something which is temporary and current and can be resolved, you want to resolve it before you head for a relationship. What a need is a part of you that's going to be with you for life, and at which point you want to find a very good match for that, which is what we're going to get to in a minute. So neediness, drowning, lack of maturity, lack of readiness, things that require you to do the work now before you head into a relationship, and to not make the mistake of finding a relationship to do that work for you, that's going to be the prerequisite. And you need to make sure that you're doing that of yourself, and that you're identifying that the person who's with you is also in a place of, okay, I'm ready enough, I'm a strong swimmer, I've learned how to swim, I'm not drowning, I'm ready to make a long-term decision because I'm in a long-term place right now. You both have to be in that place of ability to make long-term giving choices. 100%. Any questions on that? Anybody want to ask?
Feel free to type questions or to take off your mute and to ask. I'm more than happy to hear from you guys.
No.
Okay, good.
Okay, next.
Fine, that's fine. So therefore, you know, the first question we really need to be asking ourselves in a very honest way is, am I ready? And is my partner ready? And, you know, just to say something else on this, you know, sometimes we are kind of overwhelmed with our own drowning, and we get into a relationship that we really shouldn't be. Sometimes you're overwhelmed with your drowning, by the way, and you get out of a relationship that you should be in. Okay? So you have to remember that also. People break up with each other because they've got exams, or they're just, it's just like they've got so much going on in their head, they can't handle what's going on in the relationship. And you see this even in marriages sometimes, maybe not, please God, not in terms of a real breakdown in the long term, but in the short term, there are times when, people are just so overwhelmed, they can't really focus on the relationship. A rabbinic friend of mine called Rabbi Braverman, Nachum Braverman, he writes in a book that he was once standing in his house Friday afternoon, and they had a lot of guests coming over, and his wife was just flying around the kitchen. She was doing this and that, and he was just blown away by her poise, her patience, but at the same time, just her tremendous responsibility. She was working so hard. And he writes this in his book, he goes, Emunah, says to his wife, I love you so much. And she pauses for a second and looks at him and says, Nachum, less love, more help with taking out of the garbage, please. Right? In other words, sometimes people are very overwhelmed by what they're dealing with, and it's just not time to be talking about love. But that doesn't mean that the relationship's not good. Okay? It's important to understand that. So we've got to be in a place of being ready, and we've got to be in a place of evaluating in terms of, is our partner ready? And in traditional relationships, that breaks down a little bit. Maybe the way that a man might define himself as being ready is different than the way that a woman may define herself as being ready. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, I think, as we go through it. And it should be quite obvious. But your baseline is, I'm in a place where I'm ready to give. Not that I'm willing to give, but I'm ready to give. I want to. I want to be in a relationship. I don't want an accessory. I want to be in a relationship.
By the way, for those of you who spent your whole childhood giving, and therefore readiness to give is not an indication because you've always been giving. If there are any of you nice people out there, I would probably say that you'll know that you're ready because you're in a place where you're able to be given to or to receive, which might be like a step of maturity.
Yep, it's also true. And I hope you guys get this. There's a lot of subtlety here. I was ready to give. I've always been ready to give. Yeah, but are you ready to be given to? The point is to be in a space of relationship. To really be in a space of relationship where there is no manipulation. There's no focus on self in the primary sense.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to stage 2. Again, you can't even start the conversation until you've decided you're okay and the other person's okay, and now stage 2. And here's where we move from this immaturity, this lack of ability to give, this selfishness, this neediness, to the legitimate question of need. Okay, and need is going to be seen as a good thing over here because it's not neediness, it's need. Okay, so what we're needing, let's give an example of the difference between neediness and need. So I would say that if I've broken my leg, then I have crutches because I am needy. Okay, that's temporary. I can't survive without them. I've got a lot of work to do before I'm ready to walk again. Once my leg is healed, I still need a good pair of shoes that fit me, that support my, high or low arches, that I'm going to be able to walk a long distance in. That's not neediness, that's need. Okay, that's the reality of who I am. I'm in a healthy place now, but I still have needs. And the next set of questions is really going to look like this, okay? It doesn't look a good sign for a relationship, but what it means is there's your needs and the other person's strengths, and then there's their needs and your strengths.
Okay, I don't know whether this looks, how good this looks on the in terms of the diagram, so I'm just going to do it for you here. You've got someone's needs here, right, and they need to match up down here with the other person's strengths.
And vice versa.
Needs and strengths.
That make more sense?
I don't know.
If every time we go into a relationship you do this, they might think you don't like them. So yes, this is just for your own personal work. And we are going to do a few exercises, and this time we're going to give you a little bit of time in the session to start the process of answering the question, so that it's easy for you to carry on the homework at home later on. I know we all had power outages, so you had good excuses not to do your homework, but no excuses this week, okay? We're going to start the process, and again, what that means is as follows. when I have an emotional need and that need is not met, then to put it very simply in very psychological terms, right? I go into a place where I'm completely unsafe. And as a result of being unsafe, instead of functioning at full psychological function, I go into complete coping mechanism. Okay, so for an animal, or in a very basic level, if an animal is being shot at, right, their safety is being compromised, they're going to go into fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, anybody who's done basic psychology will know that. And the reality is that we do that a little bit as well as people. We go into our most non-functional and our most decrepit and our most difficult to be around and our most non-reflective of us at our strength when we do not have our basic needs met. You know, I know when I read, sorry to talk about the Holocaust again, but when I read a Holocaust story about someone who was starving, who shared their bread, my mind is completely blown by that. You have to understand what that means. You know, when you are starving and you really don't think you're going to survive because you don't have enough food, the idea of being at full function enough as a giving person where your values are kicked in over your needs, that you're willing to share bread, it's completely heroic. It's beyond, I mean, it's unfathomable. I'm always completely blown away by that. And you see that, by the way. I mean, we've seen it in Corona, the minute people start to get really worried about their income, you know, everything gets put aside and the need to survive kicks in, irrespective of all the normal rules, right? We've seen it all over the world at the moment. Like, this is not new to us. And we know that the more people are threatened, the more we can expect behaviors to just completely change into psychological coping mechanisms.
So I just want to interject for 1 second. So think about this now just in terms of relationships that you have. Maybe relationships with your parents if you're not in a romantic relationship, or with friends, or if you're in a romantic relationship. And just think about a time when you did not behave well. Think about a time when you did not react particularly generously, with generosity of spirit to an outburst or to an accusation or to a request. You know, we have teenage kids at home, so sometimes it'll be like, hey, could you, we've just cooked dinner, cleaned up the house, done this, done that. You know, we say to one of our kids, would you mind taking the rubbish out to the bin? And they'll be like, oh, for goodness sake, right? And it's like, dude, I've been working like 18 hours so far. It's not a 3 minutes help. You know, like what's going on? But if you, right, so when you look at that as you ask a child or a teenager, like, why did you react that way? Could you go pick up your brother? Could you go drive here? Could you go do that? No, right? They won't tell you, oh, even though you were working for 18 hours today in order to help us, and you asked me to do one thing, that was totally unreasonable. That's not how they're looking at it. They'll see it as a metaphor of you're always interfering, you're always making demands, you're always. And so as a result of that, they don't bring them their best selves to the situation. So that might be inexcusable or it might be wrong, but we're looking for here to try and just to understand. So I want you to think for yourselves, when was the last time that you snapped? Okay, that you were rude, that you were just difficult, or it could be done quietly. It could be done like you avoided messages. You know, you ignored texts. You left someone. You know, just think of it in those terms, and you'll get a very strong sense of what Ilana's talking about when she means when you get moved out of your own psychological safety and you stop behaving in a way that you're proud of. You stop behaving in a way that shows maturity, and you can even cause pain to another person.
Yeah, that's right. I have a friend, you know, and she said when she was choosing who to marry, she's a very accomplished young woman, so she had quite a lot of choice, you know, and she said, I know I picked the right guy because I'm so nice around him. Okay, and this is quite like a sassy, you know, like hard type of, you know, like modern competitive, you know, upbeat woman. And she said, I'm so happy with my choice because when I'm around him, out comes my sweetest, my most vulnerable, my nicest side. And this is one of the really, fabulous questions to ask. So Jamie just said question number one, what is it that I've noticed is, if you like, made me act as if my safety or my security has been compromised? And can I pinpoint what that was? And and how much does that inform me about what I need from the other person? So for the example with the teenagers, if really what the teenager is saying, the way you asked the question made me feel that you think I never do anything, right? And therefore I reacted that way. So that teenager might need to feel very appreciated and very loved, and maybe need to have someone who's very good at expressing that. When your safety mechanism has gone off, what is it that tells you about what you need from the other person? And vice versa. What is it? Which dynamics? And by the way, we don't need lots of relationship experience to know this. We've got lots of friendship experience. We have friends that bring out our jealousy, our insecurity, our self-consciousness, our lack of confidence. And we have friends that make us feel like $1 million. Use your intuition to hone down what's the difference between those relationships. What character traits do you need to be surrounded by in order for you to feel safe enough that your best side is brought out?
Now, that doesn't mean that your partner, if he doesn't do that for you, she doesn't do that for you, that it can't be worked on. It can be worked on, but now you can pinpoint it. Now it can be pinpointed and it can be worked on. So again, we've got to see whether we're ready. Are we basically in a place of giving? And then the next stage is matching up strengths and needs and all of that. Great, yeah? But in order to understand yourself, you've got to ask yourself, first of all, what triggers me? When do I freak out? When do I stop behaving like a mature adult? Right? There are other questions.
Yeah.
There are other questions. One is, like Ilana just mentioned, what gives you energy? What type of thing do you like being around that just kind of brings out the best part of you, the nicest part of you? And again, remember, someone who's triggering you, right? You can work on that. Someone who's bringing out the best in you, that could stop, right? But these are awareness points in the emotional interaction so that you can actually understand what's going on rather than just feel uncomfortable and kind of not know what's flying.
That's right. And it's interesting because you can see yourself in a relationship. You can have one person who's been in a relationship with two different people, and the very same person will bring out the worst of one person or the best of the other, right? And again, it's because there's a dynamic for how we respond to people. It's not about getting the best relationship. It's about getting the relationship that does the best for us. And that's going to be very individual and change from person to person. And you might have dated, sometimes you're in a situation where you've dated someone who, socially is right up there. They've got everything going for them. And it was very uncomfortable for you. It made you feel insecure. Things that they said made you doubt yourself. And then you went out with some, unknown, unrecognized, simpler person. Everybody thought, oh, you've gone down in the world. And you've gone way up in the world because that relationship is so much better for you. So it's really, really important to recognize that the common thing over there is you. And what brings out my safety, what brings out my security, what brings out my best side. There are certain character traits, there are certain types, and I always say to people, you can tell, which one it is when it starts to make you smile, right? Sometimes I'll throw out examples, and when you start really smiling, it's your one. Right?
So let's do an exercise right now, guys. Let's start. Exercise number one. We're going to do 4 exercises. We're going to give you 60 seconds, maybe 120 seconds. It's kind of weird on camera because it's just like slow, But we really want you now to write down. Take a piece of paper if you've got one. If not, write on your phone, whatever you need to do. We're trying to look at what character traits, what energies do you like being around, gives you a sense of being alive, energizes you, pumps you up. What character traits? What character traits give you energy? What character traits help you? Okay, help you in terms of accomplishing your values. Bring out the best in you. So I give you just to give you a little example. Some couples really don't do well when one partner is kind of interrogating the other. Well, I think this is really important. Well, why? Well, what about this? And what about that? And da-da-da. And some people might react to that and be like, oh, I felt like my ego was wounded. I felt like you were attacking me. So we don't have a great dynamic, that would mean, in terms of helping me with value clarification. That's not the best way for us to do it. We have to find a better way for us to work together to clarify our values, because I feel attacked by you when you ask me all of those questions. But it could be that if the person said to me, can you explain to me what your values are? And could you correct, I've got an idea over here. Could you critique my idea, right? That would be be a way for people to come together. So you want to try and figure out what character traits, what energies help you in terms of clarifying your values or accomplishing your values, bring out the best in you, etc., etc. So let's just take 60 seconds, see if you can write down a couple of things, okay?
And if you're not sure, think of relationships that have brought the best out in you and see if you can identify what was it about that really allowed you to feel so great.
Everyone who's got their cameras on is feeling upset that they have their cameras on because now we can check on you. Okay, the next series of questions, we're going to do 4 questions, okay? 4 questions, so we want you to keep on writing. The next one is going to be, Ilana, you want to introduce
I think we
yourself?
kind of combined the first two, so let's just do them.
Security. Okay, fine.
Okay, all right, we'll do the backwards one. Okay, so we've asked what makes you feel good, what makes you feel at your best, what helps bring out your values. Now we're going to ask a question, and it might not necessarily be, the answer might not be the opposite, even though the question is the opposite. What has lent itself in the past to making you feel so insecure that it has brought out the side of you that you least like? Which character traits in previous relationships, and again, relationships can be friendships, it could be siblings, any exposure that you've had to a relationship where you don't like who you become in that relationship, and what is it that is the point that's bothering you?
Yeah, meaning not I don't like my brother, but more what is the point? What was the atmosphere or the energy or the experience that brought out that brings out insecurity in general? I'm very, very bad when I'm feeling any sense of judgment in the room. You know, I really don't like it when, you know, when this happens, I get jittery.
Yeah. When you finish, maybe give us a thumbs up so we have a sense of how much time. Okay, good. We have some good self-awareness going on here. Excellent. Okay, you can take time and answer the questions later on also if you want to. Next question. Okay, next question. So when we talk about culture, we often talk about culture in terms of, the countries that we come from, right? UK culture, Israeli culture, South African culture, British culture. That's the same as UK. Anyway, so when we talk about culture on a more refined level, what we notice is that every home has its own culture also. Okay, as much as there's an influence from the country, there's a culture within the home. There could be a culture of, we communicate love through humor. There could be a culture of, sweeping problems under the table. There could be a culture of, just being very chilled out and relaxed. There could be a culture of like over-expression and communication. Our families have their cultures. So one question that we'd like to ask you, which could really inform who you end up, choosing, is which of the traits from the culture of the home that you came from are extremely important for you that you're aware of, and as we grow older, we start getting up people's houses, we're like, oh, they do things so differently. Which character traits from the cultures of the homes that you come from are very, very important for you to see replicated in your future relationships? Okay, do I get any thumbs ups over here? Okay, again, feel free to take your time and go into more detail later on. We just want to get you started so that you feel like carrying on.
Yeah, and then the final question, just again to give you a sense of thinking about the stuff. What was missing or unhealthy in your childhood that you find that you crave? Okay, these are things that you find that you crave. So think about that for think about that for a second. Is there anything that was missing or that was unhealthy in your childhood that you crave?
So some people, for example, may have come from a home where there was a lot of blame, and they really want to create a culture of responsibility because they suffered from that. Some people may have been missing a father or mother figure, and therefore, they want that sort of relationship. Some people may have come from a home where there was, there was a lot of coldness, and they want to see warmth. You will know the things that you crave because you didn't have it in your childhood. Feel free, and that will also contribute to your safety. Give me that thumbs up when you're ready. Okay, good. Now, by the way, what this is not is the end of your list, okay? What this is, if we can recommend it, is the beginnings of a very informed conversation with a mentor. Sit with someone, a rabbi, a teacher, someone whose marriage you admire, who's got time for you, cares about you, and run through what these answers mean, how they connect to each other, what it tells you about yourself, what's important, what's crucial. It doesn't mean you're going to have a very long list. What we always find, by the way, is the more you become self-aware, the shorter your list becomes, because you know the things which are crucial and the rest becomes a bonus. People who have low self-awareness just write enormous lists of all the things that they need. But take a look at the clues in your own life to see what is going to really create the best, emotional infrastructure for you. And to some degree, when you have a sense of what you really need to have in your relationship to bring out the best side, you have a sense of what your partner needs to offer you, and vice versa. When they have a sense, you can ask the question, is this something I can offer you or not? Now, I will also say that sometimes, and we get this question very often, people will say, I know what's good for me, but I'm really pulled to the stuff that's really bad for me. Okay, I have this a lot. I know that I need a woman who's supportive, but I like a challenging girl who makes my life impossible, right? Or I know I want a guy who's sweet, but I really like hard-headed, that sort of thing. And I would say, whilst that is a common question, there is a point of maturity where I start to move into a place where I actually start to want the things that I know will bring me happiness. And the inability to desire the things that will make me happy is also part of the maturity process.
Yeah, man, and I also think that, you're going to have this list of what we would call your E list. So your I list, which we covered last week, that might be things like, I really want to live in Israel. I believe in Judaism. That you're the type of person that's really needs a kind of a deep level of financial honesty. You're just not the type of person that can be around, something like that, or generosity. These are values. And on the E level, you're looking for compatibility with someone, meaning that strengths and needs match up, but also, which we haven't really mentioned up until now, it's really important to just like them. And that sounds really stupid, right? It's so obvious, but actually to just kind of respect them on an emotional level as well as on a intellectual level. To just give you an example from our relationship. People think this is intellectual, but it's not. It's really coming from an emotional sense of kind of. So like Ilana has a really amazing ability to kind of. We're going to ask a question over here. Should you and your partner also be best friends? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to tell you this cool thing about Ilana, okay? And then we'll do the best friends thing. So Ilana's got an amazing ability to kind of stay objective in situations and to kind of know what words will hurt people, or in terms of communication, you're saying, I want to say X, Y, Z to the person, but the word you're using, you're really saying A, B, C. You're being critical whilst you're being nice. You're bringing, right? So for the longest time, and I still do it often, but not as much as I used to, I would always have Ilana just look over emails that I was sending, if there were like difficult emails that I needed to say, because she would spot in there where I was being passive aggressive, or where I was being a little bit cutting.
Which is always very weird when the email was addressed to me. I just found that ridiculous, but whatever.
It wasn't.
Just
Very good, very good. She also has a good sense of humor.
bad British.
Right, but for me, that was something, I just really like being around that, like this kind of sense of awareness of how other people work, a sense of how words are going to affect people. Okay, just as an example. And I think that Ilana often says, I'll say it for her, but she often says that I'm quite emotionally effusive. So I'm very comfortable saying I love you. I'm very comfortable being warm and connecting and this, that, and the other, right? And that brought out a certain part of Ilana. That was great for her too, right? So we like each other. It's not just like, oh, these are compatible. This works well. This will produce the type of hope. That's true. But also it's like, I like you. I respect you. I want to be around you. Like I enjoy the way that you interact with the world. I enjoy the nuances of your character. Right, and so when it comes to this question of being best friends, I think, which was a question that was asked, should you be best friends with your spouse? I think that you can be best friends with your spouse. Other people have relationships where they're not necessarily best friends with their spouse, but it doesn't mean that their spouse is not the closest person to them in the world, and that they throw themselves under a bus in a second for their spouse. Right? But friendship kind of works differently. There's different dynamics. There's different, some people have a relationship that's emotionally intimate, that's connected, and that's growth oriented. And there's a recognition that, like, you might want to go play golf with somebody else, right? And that's not offensive, okay? Other relationships are more, kind of all inclusive, and people just inseparable and want to spend all the time that they can together. So I think it kind of depends. It certainly can be. But it not being does not mean that there's something intrinsically wrong with the relationship, at least in my experience.
Yeah, that's true. But I would also say that whilst there are different dynamics in husband and wife, setups, somebody who's going to somebody who's going to bring out the best in you, you can't help but like, because we're selfish. So if I'm happy when I'm around you, it's going to be very hard for me to just sort of see this as a very, official partnership. And it's an indication, and that's, I guess, where our intuition kicks in. If everything on paper matches up, but you're miserable all day long, then you've done your work wrong. You need to go back to that men's room and do it again. So there should be quite a natural segue from this person is good for me, and because they're good for me, and if you like, I'm a selfish person, because I like myself around them, then I'm going to feel minimally appreciative. And maximally super happy by being in their company because they do something positive for me, right? So yeah, I would have thought that. Okay, good. And the last point just on now, and then we're just going to spend a few minutes on the physical relationship. It doesn't take us, it doesn't have to take too long on that part of things, and we can extend next week if need be. And that is that also remember when it comes to your lists of the things that you need and the things that you're lacking and the things of this and the other, people get very complicated in this area. They get very sensitive, they get very bitty and detailed, and it's all part of a kind of an over, it sounds so critical. I really don't mean it this way. It's like an over obsessive perspective on everything that they need to just feel comfortable. We're not looking to feel comfortable. We're looking to grow. It's not the same thing. You want to feel comfortable. Of course you want to feel comfortable. But the point of the relationship is not to anesthetize you and to wrap you in bubble wrap in a way that nothing can ever happen, right? So when you look at your lists, you got to channel your E list through the intellect. You got to say, is this this is what I need, this is what I feel I need, but maybe I need to not need that anymore. Maybe I need to work on myself a bit more so I don't need that so much. You have to look at this stuff, a little bit critically. I mean, Lana always says, a beautiful thing. She's like, if you don't want what is good for you in a relationship, then you're probably not ready. Okay, you have to know what's good for you. You have to have an intellectual relationship with what's really going to be good for me, versus just what makes me feel super comfortable and what reassures me, and I never have to, I now just feel
risk-free forever. It doesn't really work like that. You've got to elevate it a little bit more.
We just did a video on Instagram today about opposites attracting, and we spoke about this idea. Sometimes we have very familiar patterns that are horrible for us because, I grew up with a very, incapable sibling. So I do everything for everybody, but it's not the best thing for me. Or I grew up with a mildly abusive parent, so I got very good at, just becoming very withdrawn and ignoring how people feel about me. But sometimes things which are very familiar have got nothing to do with growth. They've got an awful lot to do with survival.
Yeah.
And it's quite painful in many ways outgrowing that. It's a wonderful thing to outgrow that, but growth is always a little bit painful. And the ability to say, okay, I know I can cope with someone who was always horrible to me because I've had to do that my whole life. But I actually would like to mature into being available to be with someone who's nice to me and to believe them when they say loving words and not assume that they're about to, stab me in the back. So many of the patterns that we grow up with in all our dynamics, our siblings, our parents, some of our friendships, they will create patterns. And as a thinking person, to be able to say, I know that I am drawn to people who do this because it's familiar, but I would like to outgrow that and move into something which is healthier for me. And I'm going to have to adjust that and allow myself a bit of self-love and healing so that I'm open to that. That's where you use your intellect to not just fall prey to your previous experiences time and time again, but actually allow yourself to upgrade your relationship. It's really important to do that, to be conscious of that.
Right. Okay, good. So look, and there's so much more to be said about about this whole part of and we encourage questions. Ilana just mentioned it as a shameless plug. But we do have an Instagram channel. It's at Ilana and Jamie. If you guys want to check it out, we're putting up videos all of the time that allow just kind of refresh some of the stuff we're saying here, some more stuff too. But we're doing it really so that people can have a regular interaction with these types of ideas. We really want you to build that I list, build that E list, and that process. I happen to know Rabbi Ziskin very well. We were study partners in yeshiva. I strongly recommend the Ziskins as mentors potentially. For just going over your lists and thinking about this stuff, and they'll hold up a mirror to help you that can reflect back and really see, am I being self-indulgent with this need, or is this actually a reality? Is this who I am? Is this the right way for me to be? Is this the right way for me to go? So look, Rabbi Ziskin, I just want to ask you as follows. We have about 3 minutes left officially in the session. We can go a few minutes over if that's okay with you, if you would like that. Or we can save it till next time and take some questions now to deal with the physical stuff. What would you like? It's just about 3 or 4 minutes.
I would say you should continue. I think people are happy. People should feel comfortable going if they need to. This is recorded, so if you have to run, what you miss will be recorded. But I think people are happy to stay. So,
okay. So look, it's a very obviously it's a very public forum. And we're not going to have a whole conversation here about intimacy, the Jewish approach to intimacy, the way that we would advise people to approach this. But I'm just going to say 3 kind of pretty basic principles and elaborate on them briefly. Obviously, Ilana, feel free to jump in at any point in terms of the points that we're making. The first thing is, and this will be a constant refrain, Jewish marriage is about giving. Jewish marriage is about caring. Relationships are about caring about the other. It's about putting your own needs second and your partner's needs first, in the intellectual realm, in the emotional realm, okay? And also in the physical realm. The concept is my focus is the other. My focus is the other. Now, this is a huge challenge today, a huge challenge, because just because of the movies, for the last 50 years, the romance of the movies, the way that loving relationships are portrayed, the entire focus from a sexual standpoint has been transferred away from the desire to connect to your partner, to give to your partner, to be there, to really connect, and it's been become much more focused on selfish needs, Yeah, and there's all kinds of weird things that people say. They'll say there's this concept of whether someone's good. Is someone good in bed? These are like strange ideas. These are strange ideas, as if there's this kind of like, it's a technical thing, right? Rather than an intimate, loving, connected experience where people are in love and they're connected, right? So these are strange ideas, but they get in there. They get in right at an early age. But taking from a sexual standpoint in the physical relationship, being in a taking place, meaning that you're focused on your own needs, that builds another really strange concept and that's called fantasy. The whole idea of a person's fantasies, that a person's physical needs are somehow connected to like stories and movies and visions and ideas and pictures, all of this kind of stuff. It's very self-focused, and it's not directionally coming from a place of caring. It's coming from a place of taking. And therefore, this could be talked out more again with the Ziskins or with mentors or Ilana and myself, privately, kind of a little bit offline. But this idea of trying to get to a place where you are fantasy free, okay? Trying to be in a place where your focus is the connection to the other, giving, right? And just sorry for mentioning this, but I always also a person's got to really try and live porn free. People have got to try and live porn free, because pornography is such a lie. It's such a lie. It's such a fake representation. If you're part of me for being so stupid about this, it's like watching Fast and Furious movies and then thinking that you know how to drive. It's so exaggerated and stupid and utterly devoid of any of the sensitivity, specialness, connection. Just the whole thing is entirely misfocused and incredibly visceral and incredibly visual, right? So again, it creates a tremendous sense of fantasy, a tremendous focus on self, a tremendous focus on all kinds of factors that really have no place. They really don't need to be there or belong. So this is my personal opinion. This is how I feel about it. Obviously you guys know from the stuff that we, those of you that came to Thailand, and we've been involved in human trafficking for a long time, and just this whole process of seeing another human being as an accessory to my own sexual experience, to my own sexual satisfaction. It's such an aberration. Totally normal, by the way. We're not bad for feeling this way, but it's a part of life that you have to work on. In the same way that Ilana started today by saying, children are selfish, and then they have to learn to kind of get out of themselves and realize there's other kids, there's other kids in the playground, there's other young adults at the party, there's other human beings in my life, and I have to learn to interact, right? So in the sexual and physical part of life, it's unbelievably true as well, that we start very selfish and very me-oriented. You've got to get out of yourself and into this focus of giving. And so I strongly recommend that people need to figure out how to live. I mean, again, I'm sure everyone does already. Please don't get me wrong. But just in general, statistically, right? People have got to learn how to live free of pornography and to the best of themselves free of fantasy. But the most important point is to understand that Jewish sexuality is not focused on the quality of your own experience. It's really, the focus is the quality of the other person's experience. It's about giving. It's about connecting. It's about really bringing a togetherness to the overall experience. So just to summarize, and then we'll take questions. Last week we dealt with I. Get your values clear. This week a little bit more with E. In terms of understanding the reality of your needs, not your neediness, as Ilana pointed out, but your needs, right? And then in terms of the physical, obviously in a relationship setting, you want to be attracted to the person, very much so, very excited to be around the person energetically, physically, etc. Of course, yeah, but the focus in all three of these areas is growth. How do we become one? How do we create a better relationship, a better environment, a better experience together by being in a place of giving?
Yeah,
please.
Just wanted to say something about this idea of fantasy. Often when we think about fantasy, we think about these things that we make up in our own heads, and they for sure are damaging enough, right? But like, there's another aspect of fantasy, which is not when I am, on my own and just pretending that I'm on an island somewhere making up a story. There's also a perhaps even more dangerous aspect of fantasy, which is when I'm living with a reality either about myself or the other person, but I've superimposed this other picture, right? So the example that I often give is like, how many times when people, men, women, old, young, look in a mirror, instead of looking at what actually is there and saying, oh, look, that's what there is, we start to superimpose, this thing that we think should be there instead, this thing which in most people's cases is taller, more toned, slimmer, whatever it is. We look at the reality, and instead of seeing it, we impose this other picture. And because there's this other picture, we lose the ability to be satisfied or to be grateful with what is, because we're kind of like in this battle of willing it to be something completely different that we've imagined. And there is, the problem with fantasy is that not only does it bring dissatisfaction with our reality, but it also means that we can kid ourselves so that we don't actually get involved with the reality. So you could have a person who's in a relationship with somebody else, and based on the amount of fantasies that they live with, they're basically pretending to be in a whole other relationship, and they don't look at the limitations of the relationship nor the beauty of the relationship and say, this is it, I love this, I want to nurture this and give to this. They spend the whole time in this place of dissatisfaction, and the person on the receiving end is kind of sensing it, because it's like, you're just not seeing me, and we know this as children. If we had parents who wished we did better in school, they're not looking at us, they're looking at this imagined other kid that they never had, right? We know it with ourselves when we don't feel self-esteem, we just wish we were something else, and we can't look at ourselves and say, I'm kind of cool. All we see is like, I wish I was something else. The discrepancy between what the reality is and what we fantasize causes a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction. So fantasizing doesn't just mean what goes on in my head or by myself. It also means the degree to which I'm not completely engaged and besimcha and feeling very grateful with what really is in front of me. And when I look at what I have in front of me and I stop superimposing all these other pictures on it, then often what happens is you start to realize that there's a lot of great stuff in there that you were missing, right? There's a lot of great stuff in there that you were missing. If a person looks at the mirror and all they can wish is that their eyes are further apart because they're too close together, the minute they stop doing that, they might say, wow, I've got really great eyebrows and really beautiful color. You don't see the great stuff when you are busy willing something that doesn't exist, and you can't build on the relationship when you're living in your head somewhere else.
Okay, that's really important in terms of the physical stuff, and also, truth be told, in terms of the emotional and the intellectual too.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to scoot forward here and open up the chat. Some people have asked, can you please write, if you have any questions, just put them into the chat right now so we can read them. Just feel really comfortable. The first one we've got is, do you think that one of the many reasons there is a dating crisis is because on top of your IEP criteria, people add extra boxes such as tall, dark, and handsome, or must drive this or that car?
Well, I think those are both critical.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, again, this is exactly what we were talking about. When people have self-knowledge, what happens is you say, I know that I need this to function, and if I don't have it, I'm not going to function well. So it's an imperative, it has to be there, and everything else is a bonus. When people are completely disconnected to themselves, or they replace their self-awareness with social pressure or expectations, or they create some kind of fantasy because they don't know how to interact with reality, then they create an enormously impossible list. Absolutely. It's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So, in other words, it's not, those things shouldn't be there unless they're really fundamental to you on a need level. Okay. When asking if your partner is ready, is it really fair to judge if they're emotionally ready? What if you define the term differently? So look, I think Ilana would have a different answer to me on this, but I'll say as follows. I would say is that if it's okay if you define the term differently, but you have to know how each other defines the term. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to be all in on a relationship, and 2 years in, the other person's going to be like, oh, actually, I want to play the field before I get married. Or, oh, actually, I want to do this or I want to do that. And you're like, what? And I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, as long as there's an open communication and an open conversation, we're all good. Everything's fine. Nothing wrong with defining the term differently. Something very wrong if we're working with different assumptions as to what this is, about. Ilana and I used to joke about this. We'd say like, if Ilana actually married me for my money, right? That was her assumption. It's like, she made a bit of a mistake over there. What are you gonna do about that right now? But I need to know that, okay? And she needs to know that. And then it's okay if we're together, right? Because we know it. But when you don't, when it's not been talked out, when it's not been discussed, that's when you get into trouble. Okay?
Yeah, I don't disagree at all, by the way. I think communication is imperative, but I would say that if one person is ready to make a long-term decision and the other person isn't, and therefore the decision that they're making is really just a very short-term decision, then you're going to get caught in a horrible situation where one person's ready to commit for life and the other person thinks they are, but they're going to change their mind. So it is important that everybody's ready enough to be making long-term decisions. Otherwise, it's really unfair on the person who is ready.
Okay, do couples need the same or similar levels of self-awareness in order to be compatible? No.
No.
We don't think so, yeah? We don't think so. People have to be nice. People have to be giving. People have to be focused. People have to be willing to accept criticism and to try to do better, right? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be on the same level in anything, right? As long as there is a desire to give to the other, and no need to always be right, yeah, and a willingness to work together. How do you differentiate between liking someone and infatuation, and especially between liking them versus liking how they make you feel?
Yeah, I think we're gonna put some of the P questions off to next week. We started on P today, but there's so much more to say. So whose question is that?
Tamar.
Tamar, will you hold that question on for next
Tamar
week?
Crozier, will you hold that question until next week, please?
Thank you.
How do you tell the difference between long-term and short-term needs?
I would say like this. A long-term need, on the whole, you'd be able to identify this as something that you've had in your life always, and it's not something that, if you think about it, you need to be cured from. I know that what's really important to me, it was really important in my relationship, is to feel like really loved. Okay, that's always been true of me, and I don't intend to have lots of therapy till that goes away. That's like a consistent, So when you say need, if this is something that this has been true of you forever, part of your personality, part of what allows you to function, it doesn't make you horribly dependent on the other person. It just means that when this is met, I function well, and it's not something that neither myself nor my therapist feels I need to get rid of, because there's nothing intrinsically unhealthy about it. It's just, it's part of how I function well. Then we will call that, a long-term need. If this is something that is, that has been created by a particular circumstance, it's something that I know in my heart I need to heal from before I can move on and become functional, because it's a trauma, because it's a difficult relationship that's created an insecurity that I can heal from. And I don't want it in my life forever, because I feel it's holding me back, then we would call that a short-term need. It's a very vague definition, but I hope that works for you. Does that work for you?
Also, I just want to add, by the way, that you can be in a relationship with someone. Let's say if someone has been through some kind of trauma, and as a result has a very significant short-term need, right? You could be a very supportive partner to that person in that relationship, comfortable with the fact that eventually the person's going to grow through that, through therapy or whatever it is, and it won't be there anymore, right? So you can still be in a partnership, offering long-term relationship and long-term kind of commitment and support, even if there is a strong short-term need. What you don't want to do is choose a person who supports you only in the short-term needs, because as they disappear, the relationship will fall apart.
Yeah, that's right. Like food is a long-term need. You don't have to get rid of that as a need. But if you become, at the end of a fast, you're immediately need to eat a lot, or if you're hypoglycemic and eat sugar immediately, whatever it is, you could see that as this is an immediate thing that is not a reflection of my high functioning long-term reality.
Again, this is the last question we're going to take this evening. If you have any more, you should please feel free. to kind of write them down, and we'll deal with them next week. But this is a really interesting question from Romy. Shouldn't we always try to progress and to work on ourselves?
Yes.
How do you know you're ready if you always need to progress, right? And there's always further to go, which is a fantastic question.
Totally. And by the way, and this sounds like a cop-out, but it's really helpful. A mentor is very helpful for these things. A mentor who can say to you, you are in a process where you are still evolving to the point that who you would choose now is not the same person that you would choose in 6 months' time, because you're really in a process of maturity, evolution, figuring things out. And it's, it's very scary sometimes to think, gosh, if I'd have got married last year, I'd have be marrying somebody very different. Like, what if I get married now? What does that mean for next year? I think we always grow, but I think we come to a point, like I said, in terms of our maturity, where we sort of land in a place where, yes, I'm going to carry on growing, but I know enough about who I am because I've hit a point of stability that if my partner is compatible with who I am now, we'll be able to grow together because there is something stable about the place I've landed in. If I feel that I'm in a place that is completely evolving, that there's so many things I haven't worked out, I don't want to cement myself into the decision. I want to wait 6 months and see where I land. But when you grow, and again, a mentor is very helpful for this, when you've done a lot of the work in terms of figuring out what you want your life to be and your values, and there's a certain stability that comes with landing, if you like, in a place of adulthood. That doesn't mean that you stop growing. It means so long as you have things in common, you can carry on the growth journey together because you share the core values that will inform the rest of your journey. It is hard to know where that stage is, which is why a mentor is very helpful, but you will feel a certain sense of, okay, I know enough about myself now that if I'm going to stay stuck here, but if my partner shares the conclusions for this stage right now, that I'm not scared to go on an adventure with this person next to me. I hope that helps answer the question. Where's Ruby? Is that helpful?
She's on the next page.
She's on the next page. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So listen, thank you guys. We hope this was helpful to you. Please, if you have any further questions, please make sure you write them down and you can throw them at us at the beginning of the next session. And barring another what's it called, power outage in South Africa, or the world ending, that could also happen at the moment. It wouldn't be surprising how crazy things are at the moment, right? But barring all of that, we look forward to seeing you next week for the 5 biggest mistakes people make in communication and love. Okay.
Pleasure.
See you guys.
Thank you, Jamie and Lana. We'll see you guys next week. Everybody work on this stuff. It's definitely easy to hear it and recognize it's so real and so valuable, but you have to do your homework. So I just don't want to sound like a broken record. I'm encouraging everybody, work on those questions, chew on it. It's a long process, but totally worth it. And you might have more questions next week as a result. See everybody next week.
And everyone should feel free in the interim to refresh a lot of the stuff we say. You find angles on the Instagram thing. So, and that's at Ilana and Jamie, and feel free to get on there, to ask questions there as well if it helps you. We're happy to interact offline also.
All the best, everybody. Good night. Thank you.